I thought I had the perfect marriage. Until my 6-year-old son innocently mentioned that Daddy's ring fell in the hotel room. The hotel room I'd never seen, with a woman whose voice my child recognized. While I was home with a headache, trusting my husband completely, he was teaching our son to keep secrets that would shatter everything I believed about our life together. What my wealthy, entitled husband didn't know was that this black woman from Detroit wasn't going to beg, scream, or fall apart like he expected. Instead, I smiled, filed the papers, and planned a revenge so quiet and devastating that he'd spend years watching me thrive without him, realizing too late that he'd lost the only real thing he ever had. If you're watching this story unfold, hit subscribe and tell me where you're from. Because what happened next will show you exactly how a woman reclaims her power when betrayal tries to break her. The smell of bacon always made our kitchen feel like home. I stood at the stove, watching the strips sizzle and pop in the pan while Miles sat at our marble island, swinging his little legs and chattering about his upcoming field trip to the zoo. "Mommy, can I bring my camera? The one Daddy got me for Christmas?" "Of course, baby." I flipped the bacon and smiled at my 6-year-old son. His dark curls were still messy from sleep, and he had syrup on his cheek from the pancakes I'd made earlier. "Just remember to keep it safe, okay?" "I will. I promise." Miles took another bite of his pancakes, then looked up at me with those big brown eyes that reminded me so much of my own. "Oh, Mommy, I forgot to tell you something." "What's that, sweetheart?" Daddy's ring fell in the hotel room. The bacon grease popped, and a drop landed on my hand. I didn't even feel it. Everything inside me went still and cold, like someone had pressed pause on my whole world. "What ring, baby?" My voice came out steady, even though my heart was beating so fast I could hear it in my ears. "His wedding ring. The shiny one like yours." Miles pointed at my left hand. "It fell under the bed, and Daddy couldn't find it. He said bad words." I turned off the burner and set the spatula down carefully. My hands wanted to shake, but I wouldn't let them. Not in front of Miles. "When did this happen?" I asked, transferring the bacon to a paper towel-lined plate. "When we went to get ice cream last weekend. Remember? You had that headache, so Daddy said he'd take me out for a few hours." Last weekend, when Ethan had said he was taking Miles to the new ice cream shop downtown. They'd been gone for 3 hours. Miles had come back with chocolate on his shirt and stories about the different flavors he'd tried. "At the hotel?" I kept my voice light and curious, like we were talking about the weather. Miles nodded enthusiastically. "It was a really nice hotel, Mommy. There was a big bed and fancy soap in the bathroom that smelled like flowers, and there was a lady there who knew Daddy's name." The kitchen suddenly felt too small, too warm. I gripped the edge of the counter and forced myself to breathe normally. "A lady?" "Uh-huh. She had yellow hair and a pretty dress. She talked really quiet to Daddy, like this." Miles lowered his voice to a whisper. "And she gave me cookies while Daddy looked for his ring." I walked over to Miles and smoothed down his curls, needing to touch something real and good and innocent. "Did you find the ring?" "No. Daddy said we had to leave it there, and that I shouldn't tell anyone about the hotel because it was our special secret." Miles looked up at me with worried eyes. "But I can tell you, right, Mommy? You're not anyone. You're my mom." Something cracked open in my chest. This sweet, trusting little boy had just handed me the truth that his father had tried to hide, and he had no idea what he'd done. "Of course you can tell me, baby. We don't keep secrets from each other." I kissed the top of his head, breathing in the smell of his shampoo. "But maybe we should keep this between us for now, okay? Just until we figure out how to help Daddy get his ring back." Miles nodded seriously. "Okay, Mommy. I can keep secrets too." After I walked Miles to school, I sat in my car in the parking lot for 20 minutes, staring at nothing. Other mothers walked past my window, heading home to start their days. Some waved, and I waved back automatically. my face wearing the same pleasant mask I'd perfected over the last 8 years. 8 years. That's how long Ethan and I had been married. 9 years since we'd met at that tech conference where I was working as an event coordinator. He'd been this charming, brilliant white guy with startup dreams and family money. I'd been the black girl from Detroit who'd worked her way through college and was determined to build something meaningful with her life. He'd pursued me like I was the most fascinating woman in the world. Flowers, long conversations about our dreams, weekend trips where he'd hold my hand and talk about our future. When he'd proposed on the beach in Monterey, I'd felt like the luckiest woman alive. His mother, Margaret, had been polite, but cool from the beginning. Always asking when I planned to find my own career path after we got married, even though Ethan and I had agreed that I'd stay home once we had children. Always making little comments about how different our backgrounds were, how challenging it must be for me to adjust to their family's way of doing things. But Ethan had seemed to love that I was different. He'd said I grounded him, made him see the world in new ways. When Miles was born, Ethan had cried and called me his queen, said our son was perfect because he had the best of both of us. Now, sitting in my car, I thought about that yellow-haired woman in the hotel room. I thought about Ethan's missing wedding ring. I thought about my 6-year-old son being told to keep secrets. And I thought about how Ethan had come home that day and kissed my forehead while I lay on the couch with my headache, asking how I was feeling and if there was anything he could do to help. He'd even offered to make dinner so I could rest. The performance of it all made my stomach turn. I drove home slowly, taking the long way through our neighborhood of perfectly manicured lawns and houses that cost more than most people made in 5 years. This had been my world for 8 years, but right now it felt like I was seeing it through different eyes. Our house was a beautiful colonial that Ethan had bought right after his latest startup sold for enough money to set us up for life. I'd spent months decorating it, choosing every paint color and piece of furniture with care. I'd wanted it to feel warm and welcoming, not like the cold, formal house where Ethan had grown up. I'd succeeded, maybe too well. Everyone always commented on what a lovely home we had, how lucky Ethan was to have someone who made everything so beautiful and comfortable. I pulled into our driveway and sat there for a moment, looking at the front door I'd painted a warm blue-gray last spring. Miles had helped, getting more paint on himself than on the door, and we'd all laughed about it for days. Inside, the house felt too quiet. I walked through the rooms I'd carefully designed, touching surfaces I'd polished just yesterday. Everything was exactly where it should be. Everything looked perfect. But something was broken now. Something that couldn't be fixed with the right paint color or a new throw pillow. I climbed the stairs to our bedroom and stood in the doorway, looking at the king-sized bed where Ethan and I had made love just 2 nights ago, where he'd whispered that he loved me, that I was everything to him. Had he been thinking about her then? Had he been comparing us? I walked to Ethan's dresser and opened his jewelry box. His watch collection gleamed against the dark velvet lining. His college class ring sat in its usual spot. His grandfather's cufflinks were arranged just as he liked them, but the small dish where he always put his wedding ring when he showered or worked out was empty. I closed the box and sat on the edge of our bed. The silence pressed against my ears until I could hear every small sound the house made. The hum of the refrigerator downstairs, the tick of the clock on the nightstand, the whisper of air through the vents. This morning, I'd woken up next to my husband in our beautiful home, with our sweet son down the hall. I'd felt grateful for my life, even if it wasn't perfect. Even if Margaret still made me feel like an outsider sometimes, even if I occasionally missed having my own career, I'd thought we were happy. Now I knew that while I'd been making breakfast and packing lunchboxes and creating a home, Ethan had been creating lies. While I'd been trusting him completely, he'd been teaching our son to keep secrets. The worst part wasn't even the cheating, though that felt like a knife in my chest. The worst part was realizing how easy it had been for him, how completely I'd trusted him, how thoroughly he'd counted on that trust. I thought about Margaret's comments over the years, how I should be grateful for what Ethan provided, how some women didn't know how good they had it. How I was lucky that Ethan was colorblind when it came to race. Had they all assumed I'd stay quiet if I found out? Had they all believed that a black girl from Detroit wouldn't dare risk losing this lifestyle? The thought made me stand up, anger replacing the numbness I'd felt since this morning. I walked to the window and looked out at the street where children rode bikes and neighbors worked in their gardens. Normal people living normal lives, dealing with normal problems. My problems used to be normal too. Deciding what to make for dinner, whether Miles needed new shoes, if we should repaint the guest room. Now my problems were different. Now I had to figure out what to do with the knowledge that my marriage was a lie. Now I had to decide how to protect my son without destroying his innocence. Now I had to figure out who I was, when everything I'd believed about my life turned out to be wrong. I heard Ethan's car in the driveway at 6:30, exactly when he always came home. I was in the kitchen, stirring a pot of soup and trying to look normal. "Hey, beautiful." He kissed my cheek and I had to work not to pull away. "Smells amazing in here." "Just soup and cornbread, nothing fancy." I glanced at his hands as he loosened his tie. No wedding ring. "How was your day?" "Long meeting with investors. You know how it is." He sat down at the island and rubbed his temples. "Where's Miles?" "Upstairs, playing with his trains. I told him he could have an extra hour before bath time." "Great. I'll go say hi in a minute." Ethan looked at me with tired eyes. "You're quiet tonight. Everything okay?" "Just tired. Miles was extra chatty at breakfast." I ladled soup into bowls and set one in front of him. "He's excited about the zoo trip next week." "That's right. I forgot that was coming up." Ethan took a bite of soup and made an appreciative sound. "This is perfect. You always know exactly what I need." The words that used to make me feel cherished now felt like mockery. I sat across from him with my own bowl, watching him eat the meal I'd prepared in the kitchen of the home I'd created. "Oh," I said, keeping my voice casual. "I noticed your wedding ring isn't in the jewelry box. Did you take it to be cleaned?" Ethan's spoon paused halfway to his mouth. "Actually, I lost it. Can you believe that? 35 years old, and I lost my wedding ring like some careless kid." The lie came so easily, so smoothly. He even managed to look appropriately embarrassed about it. "Oh no. When did that happen?" "I'm not sure exactly. I noticed it was missing yesterday morning when I got in the shower. I've been trying to remember the last time I saw it." He shook his head. "I feel terrible about it. I know how much that ring means to both of us." I nodded sympathetically. The perfect understanding wife. "I'm sure we can find a replacement that looks just like it. Don't worry about it. You're amazing, you know that? Most women would be furious with me right now. Accidents happen." I took another spoonful of soup, tasting nothing. "I'm just glad you're okay. A ring can be replaced." After dinner, I helped Miles with his bath, while Ethan watched the news in the living room. My son chattered about his day at school, showing me a drawing he'd made of our family. We were all smiling in the picture, standing in front of our house under a bright yellow sun. "We look happy, don't we, Mommy?" "Very happy, baby." I wrapped him in a fluffy towel and hugged him close. "Are you and Daddy happy?" The question caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" Tommy's parents got divorced because they weren't happy anymore. His mom lives in an apartment now and he only sees his dad on weekends. Miles looked up at me with worried eyes. "You and Daddy are happy, right?" I thought about lying. It would have been so easy to give him the reassurance he needed, to protect him from adult worries he was too young to understand. But I also thought about that hotel room, about the woman with yellow hair, about my son being taught to keep secrets that weren't his to keep. "Your daddy and I love you very much," I said finally. "No matter what happens, that will never change, and we'll always make sure you're safe and loved, okay?" It wasn't really an answer, but Miles seemed satisfied. He nodded and let me help him into his pajamas. Later, after Miles was asleep, I lay in bed next to Ethan and listened to his breathing. He'd fallen asleep easily, like he always did. No tossing and turning, no guilty conscience keeping him awake. I stared at the ceiling and tried to figure out what I was supposed to do next. In the movies, the betrayed wife always had a dramatic confrontation, screaming and throwing things and demanding answers. But I didn't want to scream. I didn't want to beg him to choose me over her. I didn't want to hear his explanations or his promises to change. I wanted something else entirely, something that surprised me with its clarity. I wanted to disappear. Not dramatically, not with threats or ultimatums. I wanted to quietly untangle myself from this life that had never really been mine and find a place where I could be real again. The thought should have scared me. For 8 years, my entire identity had been built around being Ethan's wife, Miles's mother, the woman who'd made this beautiful life in this beautiful house with this successful, handsome husband. But it didn't scare me. It felt like the first honest thing I'd thought all day. I turned onto my side and looked at Ethan's face in the darkness. He looked peaceful, younger somehow. This was the face I'd fallen in love with, the face I'd trusted completely. But trust, once broken, couldn't be put back together with apologies or promises. It was like a window that had been shattered. You could tape it up, but you'd always see the cracks. Tomorrow, I would start figuring out how to build a life that was actually mine. Tonight, I would lie here and let myself grieve for the woman who'd been so sure her marriage was real, who'd believed that love was enough to bridge any gap. She'd been naive, maybe. Too trusting, definitely. But she hadn't been wrong to want something true. I woke up before my alarm, the way I had every morning since Miles told me about the hotel room. 3 days of watching Ethan drink his coffee and read his emails like nothing had changed. 3 days of perfect normalcy that felt like acting in a play I didn't remember auditioning for. This morning felt different, though. I had an appointment. "I'm taking Miles to school early today," I told Ethan while he knotted his tie. "They're doing some special reading program thing." It wasn't true, but lies were coming easier now. Maybe that was what happened when you discovered how simple it was for the person you loved most to look you in the eye and lie. Maybe deception was contagious. "Sounds good. I've got back-to-back meetings until 6. He kissed my forehead, the same absent gesture he'd done for years. "Love you." "Love you too," I said automatically, the words feeling strange in my mouth. After I dropped Miles off at his real time, I drove across town to a part of the city I rarely visited. The law office was in a modest building, nothing like the gleaming tower where Ethan worked. I'd found Sandra Martinez online, specifically looking for someone who specialized in family law and had good reviews from other women. The waiting room was small and comfortable, with soft lighting and tissues on every table. I wondered how many women had sat in these same chairs, clutching their purses and trying to figure out how their lives had fallen apart. "Mrs. Carter?" A woman about my age appeared in the doorway. She was Latina, with kind eyes and a firm handshake. "I'm Sandra Martinez. Thank you for coming in." Her office was warm and professional, with photos of her own family on the desk. She offered me coffee and waited while I tried to figure out how to start. "Take your time," she said gently. "I know this isn't easy. My husband is cheating on me." The words came out flat and simple. My 6-year-old son told me about it by accident. I haven't confronted my husband yet. Sandra nodded like she'd heard this story 1,000 times before. "What would you like to know about your options?" "Everything. I want to know what divorce would look like, what I'd be entitled to, how we'd handle custody." I took a breath. I want to know what my life could look like if I left. For the next hour, Sandra walked me through the reality of ending my marriage. Washington was a no-fault divorce state, which meant I didn't need to prove Ethan's adultery. We'd been married long enough that I'd likely be entitled to spousal support. Our assets would be split 50-50 unless we could agree on something different. The house? I asked. Depends on when it was purchased and how it was financed, but since you've been married 8 years, it's likely considered community property. Sandra pulled out a yellow legal pad. Can you think of any assets that might be in his name only? Business interests, family trusts, things like that? I thought about Ethan's family, their old money, the trust fund he'd mentioned once but never talked about in detail. There might be some family money that's separate. We'd need to look into that. The key is documentation, bank statements, tax returns, any financial records you can access. She looked at me seriously. I have to ask, do you feel safe at home? Are you concerned about how your husband might react if he discovers you're considering divorce? He's not violent, I said quickly. Then I thought about it more carefully. But he's used to getting what he wants, and his family. They have a lot of influence. Sandra nodded. Wealthy families sometimes try to make things difficult. That's why documentation is so important. The more prepared you are, the stronger your position. When I left the law office, I felt lighter and heavier at the same time. Lighter because I finally had a plan, a way forward that didn't involve begging or confronting or trying to save something that was already broken. Heavier because the plan was real now, not just a fantasy of escape. I drove to the coffee shop where I was meeting Renee, my closest friend, and one of the few people who'd known me before I became Ethan Carter's wife. She was already there when I arrived, grading papers from her 3rd grade class. You look different, she said as soon as she saw me. Renee had never been one to sugarcoat things. What's going on? I told her everything. About Miles in the hotel room, about the missing wedding ring, and Ethan's easy lies. About the lawyer I'd just met, and the plan that was forming in my mind. Renee listened without interrupting, her face getting more serious with each detail. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. I'm proud of you, she said finally. For what? Finding out my husband is cheating? Being completely blind to it for who knows how long? For not making excuses for him. For not blaming yourself. For getting information before you made any decisions. Renee reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You know what most women do in this situation? They confront the husband immediately. They cry and scream and beg him to choose them. They give him all the power. Maybe I should confront him. Maybe I owe him that much. You don't owe him anything. He's the one who broke your marriage vows. He's the one who involved your 6-year-old son in his lies. Renee's voice was firm but gentle. You get to decide how to handle this, Naomi. You get to choose what's best for you and Miles. After coffee, I picked up Miles from school and took him to the park. He ran around the playground while I sat on a bench, watching him and trying to imagine what our life might look like in 6 months, a year, 5 years. Would we live in a small apartment across town? Would Miles spend weekends at the big house with Ethan, and eventually, probably the yellow-haired woman? Would he grow up thinking divorce was normal? Or would he blame me for breaking up our family? Mommy, watch this, Miles called from the top of the slide. He went down backwards, giggling the whole way. Very impressive, I called back, and his smile made my chest tight with love and protectiveness. Whatever I decided, it had to be right for him too. That evening, while Ethan worked in his home office and Miles played in the living room, I went through our financial documents. 8 years of marriage had generated a lot of paperwork, and I'd always been the one to organize it all. Bank statements, investment accounts, the mortgage paperwork, tax returns. I photographed everything with my phone, uploading the images to a private cloud account Sandra had helped me set up. Each document felt like evidence, proof of the life I'd helped build, and was now preparing to leave behind. The hardest part was finding information about Ethan's family trust. He'd mentioned it early in our marriage, but had been vague about the details. I knew his mother controlled it, and I suspected it was worth more than our other assets combined. In a file labeled Insurance, I found what I was looking for. Documents showing Ethan as a beneficiary of the Carter Family Trust, with an estimated value that made me sit down hard in my desk chair. No wonder Margaret had always been so condescending. No wonder she'd made those comments about me being lucky and grateful. From her perspective, I probably looked like a gold digger who'd hit the jackpot. But the money had never been what mattered to me. I'd fallen in love with Ethan, not his bank account. I'd been content to stay home with Miles, to support Ethan's career, to build a warm, loving family together. I'd never wanted to be a trophy wife. I'd wanted to be a partner. The sound of Ethan's office door opening made me quickly close the file folder and turn off my phone. I was arranging the papers back in their proper order when he appeared in the doorway. "What are you doing in here?" "Looking for our homeowner's insurance information. The company sent a notice about the policy renewal." The lie came easily, smoothly. I was getting better at this. "Find what you needed?" "I think so." I stood up and moved toward the door. "I was just about to start dinner. Miles has been asking for your famous spaghetti and meatballs." Ethan smiled, pleased. He was proud of that recipe, one of the few dishes he could make well. "I can do that. You've been cooking all week." "That would be wonderful. Thank you." We moved around each other in the doorway, and for a moment his hand touched my waist, the casual gesture of a husband who still thought he had a wife. I didn't pull away, but I didn't lean into the touch either. Dinner was almost normal. Ethan told stories that made Miles giggle. Miles shared news from school. I listened and smiled and passed the salad, playing my part in this domestic scene that felt increasingly surreal. "Daddy," Miles said, twirling spaghetti around his fork, "when are you going to get a new ring?" I felt Ethan go still beside me, but I kept eating calmly, like I was only mildly interested in the conversation. "A new ring?" Ethan's voice was carefully casual. "Your wedding ring. You said you lost it, remember? Mommy said you could get one just like it." "Oh, right. I keep meaning to do that. Maybe this weekend, buddy." "Can I come with you? I want to see all the rings." "We'll see. Ring shopping might be boring for a kid." Miles considered this seriously. "Maybe. But I like looking at shiny things, and I could help you remember what your old one looked like." Ethan glanced at me quickly, but I was focused on cutting my meatball into precise pieces. The old one wasn't anything special, just a plain gold band. "But it was special because Mommy gave it to you when you got married, right?" "Right. Very special for that reason." Ethan reached over and ruffled Miles's hair. "You're a smart kid, you know that?" After Miles went to bed, Ethan and I cleaned the kitchen together like we had thousands of times before. He washed while I dried, and we moved around each other with the easy choreography of a long marriage. "He's getting so observant," Ethan said, scrubbing the pasta pot. "Sometimes I forget how much kids notice." "They notice everything," I agreed. "We just don't always realize it. Good thing we don't have any deep, dark secrets to hide." He said it lightly, jokingly, but there was something underneath the words. "Good thing," I said, drying a plate with more attention than it needed. Later, lying in bed, I felt Ethan's hand on my shoulder. He pulled me closer, and I let him, even though my skin felt like it belonged to someone else. "I love you," he whispered against my hair. "I love you too," I whispered back, because it was still true in some complicated way, even though everything else was a lie. He fell asleep with his arm around me, and I lay there listening to his breathing and thinking about the yellow-haired woman. Did he tell her he loved her too? Did he whisper sweet things in hotel rooms while his wedding ring sat on the nightstand? Did she know he had a wife who made him dinner and organized his files and raised his son? The questions felt less urgent now, less like knives in my chest. I was moving beyond the hurt toward something cleaner and more practical. I was moving toward action. Tomorrow, I would start looking at apartments. small, affordable places near Miles's school where we could build a different kind of life. Tomorrow, I would start planning our exit from this beautiful house and this beautiful lie. Tonight, I would let myself grieve for the woman who'd trusted completely, who'd believed that love was enough, who'd thought her marriage was real. She'd deserved better, and I was going to make sure she got it. The apartment was small and bright, with hardwood floors that creaked when you walked and windows that faced east toward the morning sun. It was nothing like our house with its marble counters and vaulted ceilings, but standing in the empty living room, I could breathe for the first time in weeks. The school district is excellent, the landlord, Mrs. Chen, was saying. Very family-friendly neighborhood, lots of single mothers, actually. Single mothers. The word should have stung, but they didn't. They felt like possibility. I'd like to put down a deposit, I said. Mrs. Chen looked surprised. Don't you want to think about it? Discuss it with your husband? I've thought about it enough. I pulled out my checkbook, the one attached to my personal account that I'd been slowly building up over the years. Ethan had always insisted I should have my own money, never knowing that one day it would become my escape fund. The check felt like freedom when I signed it. On the drive back across town, I passed the hotel where Ethan was probably meeting his yellow-haired woman right now. He'd left this morning for another client meeting, kissing my cheek and promising to be home by dinner. The lies were so casual now, so routine. I wondered how long it had been going on. Months, years. Had there been others before this one? It didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that in 2 weeks, Miles and I would have a place of our own. I picked up Miles from school and took him for ice cream, sitting across from him in a bright pink booth while he told me about his day. Tommy's mom came to lunch today, he said, chocolate chip cookie dough ice cream smeared around his mouth. She looked sad. Oh, why do you think that? She kept looking at her phone and sighing, and she didn't eat her sandwich. Miles took another big bite. Tommy said she's been sad since his daddy moved out. I handed him a napkin. That must be hard for both of them. Yeah, but Tommy said his mom is nicer now. She doesn't yell as much, and she lets him stay up later to watch movies. Miles considered this. Maybe sometimes being sad makes you nicer. Out of the mouths of babes. Maybe sometimes being sad helps you figure out what's really important. Like ice cream? I laughed, surprising myself. Exactly like ice cream. That weekend, while Ethan played golf with his business partners, I started the delicate process of separating our lives. Not dramatically, just small things that wouldn't be noticed right away. I packed a suitcase with clothes for Miles and me, hiding it in the back of my closet. I gathered our important documents, birth certificates, passports, Miles's medical records, and put them in a safety deposit box at a different bank. I opened new accounts, had my mail forwarded to a P.O. box, and slowly transferred money from our joint savings to my personal checking. Each task felt like untying a knot, loosening the threads that bound me to this life that had never really been mine. Sunday morning, we went to church like we always did. The Carter family had attended St. Matthew's Episcopal for generations, and Margaret made sure everyone knew it. She sat in the third pew, her silver hair perfectly styled, nodding graciously at the other parishioners who stopped to chat. "Naomi, dear," she said when we joined her, "you look tired. Are you getting enough rest?" "I'm fine, Margaret. Just busy with Miles's school activities." "Of course, though I do hope you're not overcommitting yourself. Ethan needs you to be at your best, especially with his new venture launching soon." New venture? I looked at Ethan, who was adjusting his tie and avoiding my eyes. "What new venture?" I asked. "Oh, did I spoil the surprise?" Margaret's smile was sharp. "Ethan's been working on something exciting. Haven't you, darling?" "It's still in early stages," Ethan said quickly. I didn't want to mention it until everything was finalized. Another secret. Another thing he'd decided I didn't need to know. During the service, I sat between my husband and son, listening to words about love and commitment and truth, and felt like a fraud. Everyone here thought we were the perfect family: successful husband, devoted wife, beautiful child. If only they knew that the devoted wife was planning her escape, and the successful husband was living a double life. After church, Margaret insisted we come to her house for brunch. The Carter family estate was exactly what you'd expect: old money elegance with fresh flowers and antique furniture that had been in the family for generations. "Miles, why don't you go play in the garden while the adults talk?" Margaret suggested, her tone making it clear this wasn't really a suggestion. Once Miles was outside, Margaret poured coffee from an expensive china service and fixed me with her steely gaze. "I wanted to talk to you about something," she began. "Ethan mentioned that you've been asking questions about family finances." I felt Ethan shift uncomfortably beside me, but I kept my expression neutral. "I like to stay informed about our investments." "Of course, dear. But some things are rather complex, and I wouldn't want you to worry unnecessarily." Margaret's smile was patronizing. "Ethan handles all the important decisions. That's what husbands are for." The casual dismissal, the assumption that I couldn't understand complex finances, the implication that my only job was to look pretty and not ask questions, it all crystallized into something clean and cold inside me. "I appreciate your concern," I said evenly, "but I'm not worried. I'm just curious about our future security." "Your security is assured, my dear. Ethan will always take care of you. That's the kind of man he is: responsible, dependable." Margaret glanced at her son with obvious pride. "You're very lucky to have married into this family." Lucky. There was that word again. "I know exactly how lucky I am," I said, and meant it in a way Margaret would never understand. On the drive home, Ethan was quiet. Miles chattered about the koi fish in Margaret's pond, but Ethan just stared out the window, lost in thought. "Your mother seems concerned about something," I said finally. "She worries too much. Always has." Ethan's voice was tight. "You know how she is about family business." "Is there something I should know about? This new venture she mentioned?" "It's nothing dramatic. Just expanding into a new market. I'll tell you all about it when things are more concrete." More lies, delivered so smoothly I almost believed him. That night, after Miles was asleep, I sat in our living room and looked around at the life I'd built. Every piece of furniture carefully chosen, every photo thoughtfully placed. I'd made this house beautiful because I'd believed we were building something lasting together. Now it felt like a museum of my own naivety. Ethan found me there, curled up on the sofa with a cup of tea. "Penny, for your thoughts?" He sat down beside me and pulled me close. "Just thinking about the future," I said. "What we want our lives to look like in 5 years, 10 years. I want exactly what we have now. This house, our family, you." He kissed the top of my head. "Maybe another baby eventually. Another baby, another child to grow up in this house built on lies, another innocent person to be taught to keep secrets." "What if things change?" I asked. "What if life doesn't go according to plan?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if we're not always happy together? What if we grow apart or want different things?" I kept my voice hypothetical, curious. "What would happen then?" Ethan was quiet for a long moment. "Are you trying to tell me something, Naomi?" "No, I'm just thinking out loud. Marriage is hard work, right? People change. I just wonder sometimes if we're prepared for that." "I'm not going anywhere," he said firmly. "This is my family, my life. Nothing could make me want to change that." The certainty in his voice was almost funny. He had no idea that his life was already changing, that his wife was already gone even though she was still sitting right next to him. "I hope you're right," I said, and let him think I was reassured. The next morning, while Ethan was in the shower, his phone buzzed with a text message. He'd left it on the nightstand, and the notification lit up the screen. Can't wait to see you tonight. Room 412, same as always. L. My hands shook as I picked up the phone, but I managed to take a screenshot before the message disappeared. Evidence, documentation, everything Sandra had told me I would need. L. Lena, probably. The woman with yellow hair who knew Daddy's name. I forwarded the screenshot to my secret email account and deleted it from Ethan's phone, then put it back exactly where he'd left it. When he came out of the bathroom, I was already dressed and making the bed. Have a good day at work, I said, kissing his cheek like I always did. You too, beautiful. I might be late tonight. Client dinner. No problem. Miles and I will find something fun to do. After he left, I called Mrs. Chen and asked if I could move into the apartment 2 days earlier than planned. She said yes, and suddenly my timeline shifted. We would leave Thursday night, while Ethan was with Lena in room 412. The poetry of it was almost perfect. I spent the day making lists and running errands, each task bringing me closer to freedom. I arranged for utilities to be turned on at the apartment. I registered Miles for after-school care at his current school, so I wouldn't have to disrupt his education right away. I researched jobs I could do from home, freelance writing, virtual assistant work, anything that would let me support us while being available for my son. That evening, I helped Miles pack a special box of his favorite toys and books, telling him we were going to have an adventure staying in a new place for a while. Like camping? He asked, his eyes bright with excitement. Something like that, I said. Just you and me. What about Daddy? Daddy will still see you all the time, but sometimes mommies and daddies need to live in different places for a while. Miles considered this with the serious expression he wore when he was trying to understand grown-up things. Will you be sad? He asked. I thought about it honestly. Maybe sometimes, but I think we're going to be happy too. Really happy. Okay, he said simply, because at 6 years old, he still trusted that his mother would keep him safe and loved no matter what. That night, lying next to Ethan for what I knew would be the last time, I felt peaceful. Not happy, exactly, but peaceful. Like I was finally moving toward truth instead of away from it. Tomorrow I would pack our car while Ethan was at work. Tomorrow night, while he was in room 412 with Lena, Miles and I would drive across town to our new life. Thursday morning I would become the woman I was meant to be, instead of the woman I'd thought I should be. I was ready. Thursday morning came gray and quiet, like the world was holding its breath. I made breakfast as usual. Pancakes for Miles, coffee for Ethan. Everything normal, everything the same, while inside me, something was shifting into place like the final piece of a puzzle. Big client presentation today? Ethan said, checking his phone while he ate. Might run really late. Of course it might. I set his coffee cup down with steady hands. Miles and I will be fine. We always are. He looked at me then, something flickering across his face. For a moment I thought he might say something real, something honest. But then Miles ran into the kitchen, asking for help finding his library book, and the moment passed. After they left, Ethan to his office, Miles to school, I stood in our beautiful kitchen and let myself feel it one last time. The marble counters I'd chosen, the window over the sink where morning light spilled in, the breakfast nook where we'd eaten 1,000 meals as a family. Then I went upstairs and started packing. Not everything, just enough. Clothes for a week, toiletries, Miles's favorite stuffed animal, some books. I moved through our bedroom like a ghost, touching nothing that wasn't essential. In Miles's room, I packed his school backpack and the special box of toys we'd prepared. His trains, the camera Ethan had given him for Christmas, the wooden blocks I'd bought when he was 2. Everything that would help him feel at home in a new place. The hardest part was leaving behind the photo albums. 8 years of pictures. Our wedding, Miles as a baby, family vacations, birthday parties. All those happy moments that had felt so real when they were happening. But photographs were just paper and memory now. The real Miles was alive and laughing and would come home from school in a few hours. The real me was about to start over. I loaded our bags into my car during my lunch break trip to run errands. The trunk swallowed our new life in neat, quiet piles. At 3:15, I picked up Miles from school like always. He chattered about his day while I helped him with his seatbelt, completely unaware that this was the last time we'd make this drive to the house where he'd lived his entire life. "Are we going on our adventure tonight?" he asked as we turned into our driveway. "Yes, baby. Tonight." I looked at our house in the rearview mirror, memorizing it. "Are you excited?" "Really excited." "Will there be room service like at hotels?" I laughed despite everything. "No room service, but we'll order pizza for dinner. How does that sound?" "Perfect." Inside, I let Miles play while I finished the last preparations. I wrote a letter to Ethan, simple and direct, explaining that I knew about his affair and that we would be in touch through lawyers about divorce proceedings. I left it on his pillow, next to the screenshot of Lena's text message. I also left a copy of the apartment lease and my new contact information. Despite everything, I wanted him to know where his son would be sleeping tonight. At 5:30, I made dinner for Miles, grilled cheese and tomato soup, his favorite comfort food. We ate in the breakfast nook while late afternoon light slanted through the windows. "Mommy," Miles said, dipping his sandwich into his soup, "are you nervous about our adventure?" "A little bit. Are you?" "A little bit too, but also excited." He took a careful bite. "It's okay to be nervous and excited at the same time, right?" "It's perfectly okay, sweetheart. Sometimes the best things in life make us feel both." After dinner, I gave Miles a long bath with extra bubbles while I tried not to think about all the other baths I'd given him in this tub, all the bedtime stories I'd read in his room down the hall. At 6:45, just as the sun was setting, we loaded into my car. Miles had his favorite blanket and his stuffed elephant. I had my purse and my keys, and 8 years of marriage dissolving behind me. "Goodbye, house," Miles said solemnly, waving at the front door as we backed out of the driveway. "Goodbye," I whispered, and drove toward our new life. The apartment looked different in the evening light, smaller, but somehow more real than our old house. Miles ran from room to room, his voice echoing off the hardwood floors. "This is my room? Really? All mine?" He spun in circles in the small bedroom that would be his. "All yours. We can decorate it however you want." "Can we paint it blue, like the sky?" "Absolutely." We ordered pizza and ate it sitting on the floor of our empty living room, the boxes and our voices filling up the space. Miles told me about his friend Jessica, whose parents were divorced, and how she got to have 2 Christmas mornings and 2 birthday parties. "Will I get 2 of everything now?" he asked. "Some things, probably. But the important things, like how much Daddy and I love you, those stay the same." "Good, because I need a lot of love." "You have more love than you could ever use up," I told him, and meant it completely. After Miles fell asleep in his new room, surrounded by boxes and moonlight, I sat by the window and looked out at our neighborhood. Modest houses with small yards, cars parked on the street instead of in 3-car garages. Normal people living normal lives. My phone buzzed at 9:47. "Ethan. Where are you? Your car's gone." I didn't answer. Let him find the letter first. Let him see the text message. Let him understand that I knew everything before he started crafting explanations. At 10:23, "Naomi, what's going on? Call me." At 10:31, "Found your note. We need to talk. This is crazy." At 10:45, "You can't just take Miles and leave. Come home, please." At 11:02, "I can explain everything. It's not what you think." I turned off my phone. The next morning, Miles and I had breakfast at the small cafe down the street. Pancakes again, but these tasted different. lighter somehow. The waitress was friendly and warm, asking Miles about school and complimenting my earrings. "I like it here," Miles announced, syrup on his chin. "Everyone's nice." "I think we're going to be very happy here," I said. We spent the day unpacking and making our apartment feel like home. Miles helped me arrange books on the shelves and hang his drawings on the refrigerator. Every small decision felt important. Where to put the coffee maker, which window should have curtains first, how to arrange the furniture to make the living room feel cozy. Ethan called 17 times. I let every call go to voicemail but didn't listen to the messages. On Saturday morning, there was a knock at my door. Through the peephole, I saw Ethan standing in the hallway, still in his golf clothes, his hair messy like he'd been running his hands through it. I opened the door but left the chain on. "Naomi." "Thank God." He looked exhausted, desperate. "We need to talk." "No, we don't." "Yes, we do. You don't understand." "I understand perfectly. You've been having an affair. You've been lying to me and to Miles. You involved our son in your deception." My voice was calm, steady. "There's nothing to talk about. It's over. I ended it. She means nothing to me. Good for her. Naomi, please. Let me explain. Let me come in." "No." "Where's Miles? I want to see my son." "He's at the park with my friend Renee. You can see him when our lawyers work out a custody schedule." Ethan's face crumpled. "You've already hired a lawyer?" "Weeks ago." "Weeks." He stopped, realization dawning. "How long have you known?" "Long enough to plan this properly." I started to close the door. "You'll be hearing from Sandra Martinez soon." "Wait. Naomi, wait." His hand pressed against the door. "I love you. I love our family. This was a mistake, a terrible mistake, but it's over now." The mistake was me believing our marriage was real. It is real. Everything we built together, everything we have. We don't have anything anymore, Ethan. We have a son who needs both of his parents to be healthy and honest. That's all. I closed the door gently but firmly, then leaned against it and waited for him to leave. He stood there for 10 minutes, occasionally knocking softly and saying my name. But I didn't answer, and eventually I heard his footsteps walking away. Through the window, I watched him get into his BMW and sit there for a long time before driving away. Even from 4 floors up, I could see how his shoulders shook. I felt sorry for him, but not enough to change anything. 3 months later, I was making coffee in my bright little kitchen when Miles ran in with his backpack, ready for school. "Mom, guess what? Jessica's mom said she might have a job for you at her office." I'd been working freelance, writing articles for websites and doing virtual assistant work for small businesses. It was enough to pay our bills, especially with the child support Ethan was providing, but a steady job with benefits would be even better. "That's wonderful, baby. What kind of job?" "Something with computers. She said you're really smart and good at organizing things." Miles grabbed his lunchbox from the counter. "Will you like working in an office again?" "I think I might." The divorce had been finalized 2 weeks ago. Clean, quiet, dignified. Ethan had been generous with the settlement, probably because he felt guilty, possibly because he wanted to minimize drama. I didn't care about his motivations. I cared that Miles and I were secure. Ethan saw Miles every other weekend, and one evening a week. He was a good father when he focused on it, patient and playful and attentive. He just hadn't been a good husband. That was his loss, not mine. "Are you happy, Mom?" Miles asked out of nowhere as we walked to school. "Yes, sweetheart. Are you?" "Yeah. I like our apartment, and I like that you sing now." "I sing. In the mornings when you make coffee. You didn't used to sing in the big house." I thought about that as I walked home alone. He was right. I did sing now. Little songs under my breath while I cooked or cleaned or worked at my laptop. I hadn't even noticed I was doing it. Back at the apartment, I made myself a second cup of coffee and sat by the window to work. The sun was bright, and someone was playing music next door, and a child was laughing in the courtyard below. My phone buzzed with a text from Renee. "Dinner tonight? That new Thai place?" I typed back, "Yes. Perfect." Then I opened my laptop and started working on an article about small business marketing, and somewhere in the middle of the second paragraph, I realized I was singing again. My phone buzzed once more. This time it was from an unknown number. "I drive by your old house sometimes. It's empty now. I hope you know how much he lost when he lost you." I stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. I didn't need to know who sent it or why. I didn't need to know what Ethan was doing or feeling or learning. I needed to keep building my life, one peaceful morning at a time. Outside my window, the world was full of people going about their days, walking dogs, heading to work, living their real, imperfect, honest lives. And for the first time in years, I was one of them. That was enough. That was everything. I went back to my article and kept singing.